There's this really weird disconnect we all just seem to kind of accept in modern life. Like, picture this. You are sitting in your car.
Right.
The highway is just an absolute parking lot. I mean, you haven't moved an inch in 20 minutes, your engine is idling, and you're just staring at the bumper in front of you.
Oh, we've all been there.
Yeah. But you look down at the map on your dashboard, and the route ahead of you is glowing this perfectly, happily green color.
Because the algorithm is just, looking at historical averages or maybe some delayed sensor data. So it confidently reports that traffic is flowing beautifully.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, you and 1,000 other people are physically trapped in reality.
And you're looking around at all these other cars, all these other frustrated people, and you're thinking, how does the machine not know we're stuck?
Right, because everyone has a phone.
Exactly. We are all sitting there holding incredibly powerful GPS-enabled computers in our pockets. They know exactly where we are, how fast we aren't moving, and, probably even that our heart rates are spiking from the stress.
It really just reveals this massive blind spot in how modern society operates. We live in an era that's completely overflowing with data. But when a real physical human crisis happens, or even just a massive friction point, like that traffic jam, the global systems we rely on are completely blind to the present moment.
They literally cannot see now.
Right.
Well, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are exploring a potential solution to this exact planetary blind spot. We're looking at a really fascinating final paper dated May 20, 2026. It's titled iUniverse, the Living Public Layer. It's written by Lev Nemotin.
Yeah, and anyone who follows Nemotin's channel, Uncompressed Thinking, probably knows his fundamental approach to technology and society.
For sure.
He operates on this premise that you can tackle massive, complex, and frankly terrifying ideas without dumbing them down for the audience. He refuses to compress the thought.
I love that. And the iUniverse paper is just a perfect example of that uncompressed thinking ethos. Because his core thesis starts with a pretty simple observation. Humanity already carries billions of sensors in our pockets.
Our phone.
Right, our phones. They're constantly tracking motion, location, health signals, ambient noise, connectivity drops, environmental cues, all of it.
But they do it privately, that's the catch. They function as these closed loops, basically just feeding data back to individual apps or, corporate data brokers, or the phone's native operating system.
Yeah.
So Nemotin is asking a much bigger structural question here. He's asking, can we harness the sensory power of those billions of private devices to create a real-time nervous system for public intelligence?
But doing it without turning private life into public property.
Which is a huge but.
Exactly. A massive challenge.
So to really grasp why Nemotin thinks this this iUniverse or IU concept, as he calls it, is so urgently necessary right now, we kind of have to look at the current darling of the tech world, which is artificial intelligence.
Right, because despite how incredibly smart AI seems right now, it has a crippling limitation.
It really does. Modern artificial intelligence is undeniably powerful at pattern recognition and generation. Large language models absorb enormous amounts of text, code, images, all this structured information. But AI is fundamentally retrospective.
Meaning it's always looking backward.
Exactly. It only knows the world through historical records. Even if a model was trained yesterday, it is still operating on a frozen snapshot of the past.
It's essentially like, think of it like a brilliant historian locked in a giant windowless library.
I like that analogy.
Right. This historian has read every book, every news article, every weather report ever written up until yesterday morning. So you can ask this historian anything about the past, and they will give you a stunningly accurate answer. But if you ask them if it's raining outside right now...
They have absolutely no idea.
Exactly. They can only guess based on historical weather patterns.
So iUniverse is basically the proposal to install a window in that library.
A window to the present.
Yeah. Nemotin argues that IU provides a live semantic layer over human activity. It doesn't replace artificial intelligence. What it does is it gives AI contact with the present tense.
Which is huge.
Right, because instead of asking a model to hallucinate or guess what might be happening during a sudden crisis based on old training data, a properly governed system receives signals about what is actually physically occurring at this exact second.
So society can instantly detect, say, a crowd crush forming at a music festival.
Yeah.
Or a localized power grid failing in a winter storm.
Right.
Or a bridge washing out. In real time.
Exactly.
Just think about the last time you, the listener, were stuck in a crowd that suddenly felt way too tight. You're trapped. The people around you are starting to panic, and you're just wishing that whoever's in charge of the event actually knew what was happening on the ground.
And that's exactly it. Nemotin envisions IU as that distributed layer of sensation. It is a shared nervous system that doesn't command human beings. And crucially, and we really need to emphasize this, it doesn't act as an all-seeing eye watching them. It simply detects conditions that matter to public safety and infrastructure.
Okay, but wait. Saying it detects conditions sounds, I don't know, incredibly sanitized.
Oh, it does.
If we are turning millions of phones into a giant sensory window for society, the immediate glaring fear is that this becomes the ultimate dystopian surveillance tool.
Yeah.
I mean, how does it not just become a planetary tracker?
Well, Nemotin addresses that head-on, like right out of the gate. He states up front that if iUniverse requires collecting raw human life into a central machine, if it turns every person into a trackable, identifiable object, it should be rejected by society immediately.
Just throw it out.
Throw it out. The entire system rests on this foundational constitutional principle, which he summarizes in simple words. Map conditions, not persons.
Map conditions, not persons. Let's break down what that actually looks like on the proposed public dashboard.
Right.
Because in the Uncompressed Thinking paper, he uses very specific conceptual layers to describe what IU is even allowed to see.
Right, he calls them things like I move, I gather, I stress, and I need.
Which are fascinating categories.
They really are. They're designed to abstract human behavior into infrastructure metrics. So iMove looks at human flow. That's the velocity and volume of commuting, walking, driving, or evacuating.
Makes sense.
Then iGather detects crowd formation and concentration, which lets a city know if an area is exceeding its physical capacity.
And then there's iStress, which honestly feels like the most vital one to me,
Oh, completely.
because it maps friction in the physical system. So if thousands of phones suddenly register abnormal waiting times, or sudden panic-like erratic motion, or even just repeated failed attempts to connect to cell towers, the system flags that the infrastructure is under severe pressure.
Yes. And that is followed by I need, which maps emerging demand. So say an area experiences a sudden drop in ambient temperature and a spike in searches for shelter or power. The dashboard maps that demand regionally.
It's just conditions.
Exactly. He even includes intellectual and cultural layers like I ask, I learn, and I create. Those track macro trends and what populations are trying to understand or debate in real time.
But this is where Nemotin draws a massive bright red line. Like, he explicitly outlines what iUniverse must never see.
Cover.
No individual belief profiling, no political loyalty scoring, no religious inference, and definitely no social credit machines.
Right, and the paper warns equally against corporate extraction and state surveillance. It cannot allow a government to search for disobedient minds, and it cannot allow a corporation to manipulate a user's private behavior with, like, microscopic, real-time precision.
The boundary is absolute. Public ideas and physical conditions may be mapped, but private minds and individual bodies may not.
Exactly.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
Saying it maps conditions and not persons sounds great in a slick tech presentation. But let's be real, isn't there a razor-thin line between knowing an entire city is desperately searching for insulin after a major flood and knowing exactly who is vulnerable?
How so?
Well, if the system knows insulin is needed, it must know who needs it, right?
Yeah. Ah, I see what you mean. But there is a profound difference, both philosophically and technologically, in how the data is handled.
Okay, explain that.
Stating that queries about water purification or insulin are rising by 400% in a specific zip code is a public signal. It tells emergency dispatchers where to send the supply trucks. But identifying a specific, frightened, medically vulnerable person inside their home, that is an invasion of privacy.
So, saying the Eastern District needs insulin is an IU condition, but saying John Smith at 103 Main Street needs insulin is surveillance.
Exactly. And Nemotin argues that if the technological architecture of iUniverse cannot guarantee that strict boundary between the aggregate public condition and the specific private individual, then the system simply shouldn't be built.
Which brings us to the actual physical mechanics of this. Because if I'm a skeptic, I'm thinking privacy can't just be a terms of service setting on some central server.
Oh, absolutely not.
Right. If all our raw location and health data pours into a giant database in the cloud, someone is eventually going to hack it or subpoena it or monetize it. A software filter trying to scrub names off a central database after the fact always fails.
And that is the most dangerous misunderstanding of how IU would actually operate. Neymotin proposes a totally inverted architecture based on local interpretation.
Local interpretation.
Yes. The core mechanism is that your raw phone reality never actually leaves your physical device.
Wait, really? So if the data isn't going to a central cloud, my phone must be doing the math itself.
Yes.
It's essentially filtering its own diary before it ever talks to the network.
That is the exact mechanism. Your phone sensors observe raw reality, its exact GPS coordinates, the gyroscope detecting the angle of your hand, the accelerometer measuring your walking speed, the microphone picking up ambient noise.
All the stuff it already tracks.
Exactly. But instead of transmitting that raw stream to a server somewhere, the artificial intelligence processing happens locally. On the silicon inside your phone, it interprets those granular signals into safe, broad abstractions.
Okay, walk me through a concrete example. Say I'm walking down the street and my phone's accelerometer measures my pace at exactly 3.2 miles per hour. Then I suddenly stop, and the GPS shows I'm in the middle of a busy sidewalk.
Okay, so in today's surveillance model, the phone sends a ping to a server saying, user XYZ stopped walking at these exact coordinates at 2:04 p.m.
Right.
But in the IU model, the local AI processes that event. It recognizes a sudden halt in movement, compares it to other nearby devices using encrypted peer-to-peer handshakes, and generates an abstract tag, something like abrupt velocity drop.
Wow. And before even that abstraction is sent anywhere, it hits what Neymotin calls a privacy filter right there. It strips away your IP address, your device ID, and your account information. It checks your personal permission settings, blocks any sensitive categories you've blacklisted, and packages the abstraction into a semantic packet.
Yes, and a semantic packet is the only thing that leaves the phone.
Just the packet.
Right. It might simply state, within this 1-mile grid sector, pedestrian density is rising, movement is slowing, and ambient stress markers are elevated. That is all the network receives. The dashboard only sees the residue after the privacy filter has burned away the identity.
Privacy before the dashboard. That creates this incredible concept Neymotin introduces called user sovereignty. The idea that your phone acts as the citizen's attorney rather than a corporate or government spy.
It fundamentally rewrites the power dynamic between human beings and technology. Under the IU framework, you maintain a personal control ledger on your device.
A ledger.
Yeah, you have absolute sovereignty over what signals are shared, how precise they are allowed to be, with whom they are shared, and for how long.
So, like, you could set your ledger to say, I am willing to share rough, anonymized movement data to help city planners optimize traffic lights, but I forbid my phone from sharing any health-adjacent metrics like my gait or my heart rate under any circumstances.
Or you might set a rule that your phone only transmits precise location data if you physically press an emergency beacon button. And even then, only for 15 minutes and only to authorized rescue personnel. You control the faucet of your raw life.
That's incredible. But if all this relies on trusting the local software on the phone, how do we know the manufacturer didn't build a backdoor?
Oh, Neymotin lays out a very strict formula for this. Open code, open rules, open audits, but closed private lives.
Closed private lives. I like that.
The machinery that interprets the data and strips the identity must be entirely inspectable. Independent security researchers, civil society organizations, and university watchdogs need full access to audit the code.
To prove it's actually secure.
Right. They need to prove mathematically that identity cannot be reverse engineered from the semantic packets, but the raw human data used to train the system, that can never be downloadable. Developers would have to rely on synthetic data, highly realistic AI-generated simulations of human behavior to build and test their models.
Just ensuring real human lives are never used as test subjects.
Exactly.
But if the privacy filters and local processing requirements are that strict, it sounds incredibly computationally heavy. You can't just flip a switch and roll this out globally tomorrow. Where do you even begin to test a system like this without breaking existing infrastructure?
Well, Neymotin proposes starting with highly disciplined, geographically constrained pilots. You deploy IU in environments where human movement, logistical complexity, and the potential for cascading failure are already highly concentrated.
Like airports. Airports seem like the perfect testing ground.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you have tens of thousands of people moving through security checkpoints, transit trains, baggage claims. A single delay cascades across the entire ecosystem instantly.
Right. So a privacy-preserving IU pilot in an international terminal could map the iStress layer perfectly. It could detect abnormal crowding at a specific gate or rising ambient audio levels indicating passenger frustration.
Or just the collective movement patterns of hundreds of people realizing they're going to miss their connections.
Exactly. The airport authority could deploy staff or open new pathways before a bottleneck becomes a crisis, and they would do it without ever identifying a single traveler's face or boarding pass.
Wow. Stadiums would be another one.
Definitely.
Just spotting crowd compression in a specific tunnel or detecting that an emergency exit is locked simply by mapping the friction and abnormal waiting times of the people pressed against it before it turns into a tragic crush.
But the true test of the system, and frankly the most urgent argument for its existence, is the citywide emergency zone.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine the aftermath of a massive flood, a rolling blackout, or a severe earthquake. The traditional infrastructure cameras, road sensors, power grids, it all goes dark.
And in that moment, the most desperate questions for a city are, where are people trapped? Which cell towers are actually routing calls and which are just ghosting? Which evacuation routes are physically impassable regardless of what the static map says?
And that's where iUniverse shines. It could instantly generate a living map of the crisis. It would show exactly where human density is trapped, where communication networks are buckling, and where official rescue instructions are failing to reach the population.
And this is the part of the Uncompressed Thinking paper that totally shifted my perspective. The system isn't just a passive one-way mirror.
Right.
In a verified emergency, IU enters an interactive mode. Your phone might bypass your lock screen to ask you a direct context-aware question, like, are you safe? Or is the bridge ahead of you physically washed out? Or do you see rising water?
It marries machine sensing with human confirmation. The sensors detect the anomaly, but the human provides the context.
It completely changes your role in a crisis. You shift from being a passive data point, just a helpless colored dot on a rescue map, to an active conscious node in the city's survival network.
Yeah.
You are contributing to the rescue effort simply by tapping, yes, the road is blocked, on your screen.
But Nemoten is incredibly careful here. This interactive mode must be voluntary, clearly visible to the user, and strictly time-limited.
Oh, for sure.
The legal definition of an emergency cannot become some permanent gaping loophole for state data collection. Every single activation of the interactive layer must be cryptographically logged and subject to public review.
Which ties directly into his layered access model.
Yeah.
Because obviously you don't want the general public having access to the exact same granularity of data as a rescue helicopter.
No, absolutely not. The resolution of the data must mathematically match the authorized purpose of the user. The general public gets a broad, low-resolution dashboard, kind of like a weather map, but for social conditions. They see regional traffic flow and major disruptions.
While emergency responders get much higher resolution data, allowing them to pinpoint a collapsed building with high human density, but their access is tied to strict purpose limits and immutable audit logs.
Exactly. And then researchers or urban planners get what Nemoten calls privacy-thickened data.
Okay, let's define that. What exactly does thickened mean in this context?
Well, thickening data is a cryptographic technique. It involves injecting mathematical noise into the data set, slightly blurring exact timestamps, and grouping individual data points into larger anonymous clusters.
So you can't trace it back.
Right. It ensures that even if a researcher has access to, say, a month of iMove data to study traffic patterns, they physically cannot trace a specific data point backward to reconstruct an individual's daily commute. The data is thick enough to show the trend, but too murky to reveal the person.
That is brilliant. But inevitably, this beautifully designed, mathematically sound system is going to collide with the messy, hostile reality of global politics.
Without a doubt.
Not every nation-state is going to play by these open-source rules. Totalitarian governments aren't going to settle for privacy-thickened data. They're going to demand the raw, unencrypted feed of their citizens' lives.
And Nemoten is brutally realistic about this. He acknowledges that universal political agreement is impossible. Therefore, the technological architecture itself must be federated.
A federated system, meaning it's not one central database sitting in a mountain in Switzerland that everyone connects to.
Exactly. A federated system is a network of independent, sovereign nodes that agree to communicate using a shared language, in this case, semantic packets. But they do not share their underlying databases or surrender control to a central authority.
So if one node is compromised, the entire network doesn't collapse.
Right. And because it's federated, the global IU map has to visually recognize different political realities. Namoten categorizes them into zones. You have full partners who abide by the strict privacy audits. You have limited partners who maybe only plug into the environmental and emergency layers.
Okay.
And then you have dark zones, which are regions with insufficient participation or technological infrastructure to generate a reliable signal. But the most critical category is the hostile zone.
Hostile zones. These are nation-states or regions flagged by the network as high risk for censorship, algorithmic manipulation, or state surveillance.
Yes. If a government attempts to hijack the local privacy filters to extract raw data, or tries to flood the network with fake semantic packets to create the illusion of public support for a policy, the federated network must mathematically isolate that region.
Wow.
The public dashboard has to visibly display its blind spots. Pretending to have perfect objective certainty everywhere is dangerous. A global map that hides its political compromises is far worse than no map at all.
This leads directly into the darkest part of the paper, the nightmare version of iUniverse.
Oh,
And what's really chilling is that pieces of this nightmare already exist today, just scattered across different industries.
completely. We already see authoritarian states deploying advanced facial recognition and mobile tracking to predict and crush protests before they even form.
Right.
We see educational software labeling students with inferred personality traits based on their keystrokes. We see social media platforms using behavioral friction to manipulate a user's emotional state and hijack their attention.
And insurance companies wanting to adjust your premiums based on the exact speed you drove to work this morning. I mean, Namoten argues that if iUniverse is built poorly, if it simply becomes a streamlined, centralized engine that makes those invasive ambitions easier and cheaper to execute, it will be a civilizational mistake of unprecedented proportions.
And the danger of total surveillance isn't just a footnote in his paper. It is the entire reason the paper exists. A technology that is capable of seeing human patterns at a planetary scale must be born with unbreakable cryptographic and legal restraints.
They aren't optional.
No, the restraints aren't a feature. They are the sole condition for the system's legitimacy.
So as you listen to this deep dive, consider your own reality. You are already generating these invisible, machine-readable signals every single day. The accelerometer in your pocket right now is measuring your movements. Your connection to the cell tower is logging your location.
Yeah, it's happening right now.
The only question moving forward is, who controls those signals, and for what purpose? Are they enriching a shadowy network of corporate data brokers? Are they feeding a state surveillance apparatus? Or could they be harnessed safely and privately to contribute to a genuine public intelligence?
The Uncompressed Thinking paper really lays out a stark choice between two deeply flawed extremes. On one side, we accept a society that remains dangerously blind to real-time crises, hopelessly relying on static maps and historical algorithms while the world changes unpredictably around us.
And on the other side?
We slide into a society enslaved by total microscopic surveillance.
And iUniverse is Namoten's attempt to chart a narrow, difficult path between those two extremes. It's a vision of a living public layer where your phone ceases to be a liability and becomes your guardian, your attorney. It allows artificial intelligence to finally understand the conditions of our world without ever exposing the individual persons living in it. Open system, closed, raw life.
It demands a profound reimagining of our relationship with the hardware we carry, and ultimately our relationship with each other in the physical spaces we share.
Which leaves me with a final thought for you to mull over as you go about your day. Think deeply about Namoten's concept of the phone as the citizen's attorney. Right now, we often view our devices with a mix of dependency and suspicion. We know they are addictive distractions, and we suspect they're spying on us.
Right.
But if our devices were fundamentally reprogrammed, legally and technologically, to fiercely advocate for our privacy while simultaneously helping our neighbors navigate a crisis, how might that change the way you feel when you flip your phone into your pocket every morning? Will we stop seeing them as corporate tethers and finally start seeing them as vital, protective civic instruments?
It is a future that requires a lot of work to build, but it's one certainly worth considering.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.